Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm very pleased to be here today with Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm Joanna Pearlstein. I'm a senior editor at Wired magazine. You can pick up copies of Wired outside later. And I'm really excited to be here with Gary. And it's interesting that so many of you said that you hadn't been to a lot of events here. I think that really speaks to the kind of people that Gary draws. Gary's really somebody who inspires passionate engagement. If you're here, you're probably familiar with his video blog, Wine Library TV. Maybe you've listened to him in his wine show on Sirius XM Radio. You might be one of his nearly 900,000 Twitter followers. I see that he has more Twitter followers than the Wall Street Journal, Ariana Huffington, and Victoria Beckham, and even, I'm embarrassed to say, Wired magazine. Sorry. And if you're here, you're probably familiar with his very interesting story. He was born in Belarus, immigrated to the United States as a young child, and turned his father's liquor store, Shoppers Discount Liquors, into a multi-million-dollar wine cellar and took it online. Gary now consults through his social media consultancy, VaynerMedia, and obviously we're all here to talk about his new book, The Thank You Economy. His previous book, Crush It, was a New York Times bestseller, and I see that the new book, Thank You Economy, is now on the New York Times bestseller list. It's going to be on Sunday, something like that. So congratulations on that. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
And please join me in welcoming Gary Vaynerchuk.
Number 2, so don't clap.
That's not good enough for you?
No, I was number 2 last time. You need to keep growing.
I
so
see.
I'm gonna go yell at Susie Orman when I run into her.
Oh, really? Is she ahead
She's
of you?
number 1.
How long has she been there?
We both came out the same week. She
Oh, you
beat me
did?
by
Oh, okay.
a couple hundred books, so it is one of those things
Yeah.
that will sit in my craw for the rest of my life.
So explain to us what the thank you economy means.
Obviously I've been asked this question 4 billion times already, and I kind of give 4 billion different answers because, it's funny, when I came up with the title, I sat there for a little bit and I said, you start using the word economy, you're putting yourself a little bit out there, right? I didn't say the thank you thesis or the thank you trend or the thank you movement. I used a very, very big word, in my opinion, with using the word economy, because I do believe that everything that's going on right now is being grossly underestimated by our society, right? To sit here and hear you say that I have more followers than things that you just said makes no sense. I mean, let's really call it what it is, right? To sit here and think that an individual that some good amount of the people in the crowd don't even know who he is, right, has the ability to be in a place where, his thoughts are being consumed on one of the biggest platforms of our time right now at a higher rate than things like the Wall Street Journal and Wired. I mean, that's just, it's borderline silly. And so what I started doing was I started kind of reverse engineering why. I started saying, why am I getting dramatically more traction than some of my contemporaries, especially when I'm a loud, over-the-top kind of character that by nature turns off a certain segment of the audience. And of course there's a certain segment that loves it.
Sure.
But I don't think I'm a shock jock, so it's not about that. And I don't have that big of a platform, right? I mean, online's huge, but it's very fragmented. Clearly, Susie Orman's able to outsell me, even though she's a waning television brand.
Wow.
I'm not bitter. So, I started reverse engineering. Why am I getting this traction? How have I built my businesses? And it actually happened because of my first book, Crush It, in 2009 was a very big success in volume of sales and New York Times list, and I came out of left field. And I didn't spend any money traditionally, and I came out during the same time that Jim Cramer and Ivanka Trump and a lot of big books came out the same week in business, and I beat everyone but Jim Cramer by a couple hundred books because of television, and it was shocking for a lot of people at Harper and a lot of people in business when I signed a very big book deal. Some of you might have read it, a 10-book deal with Harper Studio. It's a good time right now to talk about the fact that division closed when Bob Miller, the guy who was behind it, left. And so my contract became null and void. So I'm no longer part of that 10-book contract. This was a new contract. You'll see that the the imprint is Harper Business, not Harper Studio. So I'm not on the hook for 8 more, which is a good thing because in hindsight, I think you have to write when you have something to say. And I'm glad I'm not in a position where I have to pump out the content for the sake of pumping it out. And so now I'd like to be on the sidelines for a little bit and get back into the trenches where I most enjoy things. But I basically, in one of my interviews said, they said, how did Crush It sell so well? And I said, the thank you economy. And it kind of stuck. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, here's what the thank you economy is. In a day and age where I think so much of our lives are being lived on very transparent platforms where our social equity, we've heard this term for a while now, but it's the same old game, isn't it, right? The reason the internet collapsed on Wall Street and Main Street in 1999 to 2001 was because it was too early. Not enough people were on it. People weren't ready to put their credit cards into a computer. The principles of the businesses that were built in that first 1.0 bubble were not good. They bought Super Bowl commercials and bought, $8,000 chairs because VCs were going nuts. We're living through it again. We are absolutely in a Web 2.0 bubble right now. As an angel investor, some of the valuations I'm seeing are ludicrous at best. So, I'm kind of staying on the sidelines again from an investing standpoint. And what I know is that this whole thing is coming. I could have wrote this book 4 years ago. I really could have.
Really?
Really, and I'll tell you why. Because I would have wrote it as a guess or as an intuition. Today I write the thank you economy. You are reading something that has proven ROI to me. I write this book because I'm in a very lucky spot DNA-wise. I've always been, whether it was selling all my baseball cards at a show just on intuition and buying comic books just as baseball cards collapsed and comics grew in the mid-90s, or when I got into my dad's family business and I bought heavy Australian and Spanish wines when everybody thought it was about California and France, and launching my family's wine shop when it was the size of this, table, this stage we're on .com out of New Jersey, not Silicon Valley in 1997. I have good intuition where things go. So much so now that I can actually live it for a while and then talk about it, which puts me at a much higher, being right kind of place, right? So this book is about the ROI of me. Why have I been able to succeed? Why has that now worked for Wine Library, which is a $60 million business? And even more so, which is why I started VaynerMedia, because client work's about as fun as getting kicked in the face. I started it because I wanted to understand corporate more than I did. I understood entrepreneur, I understood small business, but I wanted to understand the thought process and the wiring of billion-dollar multinational companies. And that's helped me write this book, and we've seen the ROI of actually engaging and caring. And most of all, and I hope if you leave with anything this morning, you leave with that. How many people in this room have heard content is king? Raise your hand. So, there's something I'm running around saying that means a lot to me, and I believe content is king. I do. I don't think my wine show or anything I do would be successful if I didn't know what I was talking about. I knew wine for 15 years before the day I started Wine Library TV. So it wasn't the shtick or the marketing, it was, I really know wine. I really think context is the most underrated word right now in our world. And I'm obsessed with context. I'm obsessed with that I have relationships with certain people in the room here who I've engaged online with Seth, and then I get to meet him at a conference, and then I see him here. Seth and I don't really know each other, but we've been able to have coffee once because of the context that was created online, and then it grows. I don't think people understand how many micro context opportunities are in the marketplace right now for people if they want to take them. And these little tweets, whether they're a wink or an LOL or a thank you, which hence the word, or a you're welcome or what can I help you with, every person here right now, either your business, you, or the genre of your business is being talked about at length, at nausea online, and it is acceptable for you to walk in and be part of that cocktail party. And I just think that people are leaving it on the table. And this talks about the ROI of going all the way there.
So why are they leaving it on the table?
Because it's hard. Because what I do and what I ask my businesses to do is extremely difficult because it is the birth of one-on-one marketing. And one-on-one marketing is scary when you're a brand manager. at a big company and you want to just buy a TV ad and be done with it or give it to your agencies. One-on-one marketing is extremely difficult when you're like me. Listen, me and Lady Gaga and the Biebs, we don't scale, right? I mean, it's super hard what I do. I was sitting in the green room right now, I had to do a phone call for Wine Library, otherwise I would have mixed in here. But, in the 4 minutes, I was like, okay, now not enough time to come in here. And I got 2 or 3 engagements out, and so, it's
By engagements, you mean what? What does that mean?
I replied to one comment on Facebook. I emailed somebody who left a comment on GaryVaynerchuk.com, and I responded to 4 or 5 tweets. And those are micro context opportunities. And I think that everybody looks at social, and the word that kills me in this whole thing is the word media, because the social media part has really screwed people up. Because when you think media, and because this is the way media has been in our society for the last 100+ years, it's push, right? I mean, it's all, it's TV, radio, print, billboards, email services, pay-per-click. It's all push, even SEO and all that stuff. It's all push. Get it in your face. You'll consume it. You'll make an action against it. Social is the first pull play ever. What you and I are doing right now is the way business has rolled for the last hundreds of years. We're sitting here and we got to push it out, right?
Sure.
What I think is going to be the value is what happened here for the first 45 minutes, which is how do you work the room? And the businesses that understand how to work the room instead of how to give a presentation are going to be the companies that have the best chance to succeed in this enormous social destruction and disruption. Because that's what it is. It is this huge disruption. The way we interact, things have changed. And I'm just surprised that well, no, I'm not surprised. People just don't want it to change. Because if you're winning in the way it's been done before, why would you want it to change? Why would the Wall Street Journal want it to change? Why would Comcast or News Corp, why would anybody? Listen, I don't want the liquor laws to change in America. We're winning. Wine Library's doing well. So it's funny, I've always used the word winning, and now it's Sheen's winning. Every time I say that,
You gotta find a new word.
I'm like freaking out in my head. I gotta come up with something. I'm gonna change it to dominating. We're dominating. And and so it's really fascinating to understand that. What I don't understand is even when I was a little guy, and let me rephrase, as a very small player, though I have enough to lose, like in the wine business, I'm surprised that bigger companies don't have the agility or just the complete knowledge of like, you're big enough, you're never too big to go out of business.
Sure.
And that's fascinating to me.
A blogger named Heather Armstrong, some people may be familiar with her. She's a mommy blogger, and there's a story about her in the New York Times Magazine recently. And so a couple years ago, she came home from giving birth to her second child to a broken Maytag washing machine that she had just purchased for, $1,600. And Maytag didn't really feel like helping her. And she was desperate in all of the ways that a person in such a situation would be. And she finally said to the person on the phone, I have something like more than 1 million Twitter followers. Will you help me? I'm going to say something about this. It's crazy that you're not saying anything. And Maytag was like, we don't care. And so you can imagine what happened. She went online and she kvetched about Maytag. They suddenly realized, like, oh crap, like this was actually kind of a bad idea to ignore this woman who's very influential in her specific sphere. Maytag got a lot of negative attention for it. I think as a result of this whole interaction, another company donated a washing machine to a women's shelter as a mea culpa, which is almost bizarre. And what I don't get about this is that the negative attention to Maytag was just so huge, and it's just a single person in her washing machine. And I guess, so what I understand is, what's their problem?
Well, there's a lot of things. Let's first understand this. Let's get really serious for a second. Let's all go into the boardroom and look at the P&Ls at Maytag. They may just say, guess what? We got negative tension. Doesn't matter. We're up 33% in our stock. So we all live in our, especially my bubble of social, we all think these things are so devastating, and nothing for nothing, they may not be. As bad as the PR was of that, right? I mean, American consumers are funny. I mean, BP's not out of business. They did worse. Right? And so the question becomes, when does it become practical? And that's kind of what I'm talking about in this book. See, I think one of the real advantages I have is that I have no interest in being a good guy. I'm not really interested in being Mother Teresa or let's all hold hands and rock climb and drink tea and everything's gonna be okay and la la la. I'm just not. It's not what I'm about. I am a raw businessman at its core. My first business was ripping people's flowers out of their yards and selling it back to them, right? So that's where I come from. I don't come from, growing up on a reservation and hating the man and let's all change the way business is done. This is so real to me. This is so money. This is so business. This is so suit and tie, PowerPoint, put money in the bank. This is all business to me. And so the reason I wrote this book now and not 4 years ago is because that Maytag story 2 years ago has some interesting buzz and has some PR, but I don't think it's hitting the bottom line enough to make anybody really pay attention. What's happening is the maturity. Listen, Borders sat in a room in 2001 and decided that the internet was a fad enough and that Amazon was so stupid to pay them for infrastructure. This is great. Let's let them do our fulfillment and our data and all that. And they put themselves out of business. There was 8 very smart people on the board of Blockbuster who got into a room and said, this Netflix thing is not serious. We're not worried about it. And they are no longer in business. Smart people and smart businesses dismiss technology and culture shifts. This is being dismissed. I'm telling you right now, every person in this room is dismissing what I'm talking about in this. No, because here's what I know. Even myself, who's so passionate about it, is dismissing it because it's how we roll. It's difficult for us to understand all the way where this goes. But I can taste, as I've tasted a lot of things in my life, this is going to grow to such a huge level because what happens is we all know the core of how we buy products. At the end of the day, word of mouth is the game and social context is the game. And I'll tell you what, the first shot fired in this thank you economy was when Jeff Bezos decided to buy Zappos, okay? He paid $1 billion for a company, not for shoes, but for culture. The more important shot that was fired recently is the blog post by Google 3 weeks ago about how they're changing their algorithm to incorporate social context. That's the one that has made my bigger clients call me and say, or the ones that passed on my pitch and say, can you come back and explain what you were thinking? Because now all of a sudden we're touching things that they understand. A couple people on Tumblr or answering a couple questions on Quora is like, what? But when you start talking about Google search, they look at their bottom line and be like, wait a minute, we're spending a lot of money in this. What is this? Why is this? And what happens when television gets disrupted? That's my favorite conversation right now, right? Because we've been hearing about it forever. But of course, it's always too early because Sally, Arkansas has no idea what a boxy box is. And 99% of the people don't know how to wire an Apple TV and hit video 4 and make it work. It's all way too nerd, right?
Sure.
When it becomes normal, when Sally, Arkansas comes home, takes her iPad, hits one button, and it controls her Apple television, not the Apple TV, and it's all seamless, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist, that's when television's gonna be disrupted. When TV is fragmented and the numbers really start coming out of what people are really watching on television, not the bull crap that Nielsen's has been feeding everybody, well then everybody's gonna wake up and say, well, wait a minute, where do we spend these hundreds of millions and billions of dollars? It's going to end up in the end user's pocket. It's going to be very fascinating how this all starts happening. It's going to be a very substantial deal.
Here's something that I don't entirely get because you're able in your business as a wine guy, like you have kind of built-in content, right? As you've basically just said. So you can be tweeting and engaging with customers and because the kind of product that you have is both something that...
Do you know that 85% of the people that follow me on Twitter minimum are not into wine?
But
do you?
Initially, well, maybe. But so if initially they got into you, I mean,
right.
You talk about this in your book. You basically say like, you don't go out and talk about your store.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, that's not what you said exactly, but
sure.
You go out and talk about the product, the kind of, you
be
talk about Chardonnay and you
yeah,
don't talk about
absolutely.
your store. So, but you're fortunate in your business when you were beginning in that you have a product that A lot of people like, and B, a lot of people, it's a little bit mysterious as a mystery to it. People don't entirely get it. People need more information or have an appetite for more information. So in your business specifically...
How many people here, you give the real answer, are massively passionate about wine? Raise your hand.
That's not really my point, though.
Well, I think it is the point. Let me just jump in for a second.
Yeah.
The point is people have been very confused because I've been successful and have thrown it to, well, wine's so interesting. Wine is so small in America, it's not even funny. It's a very, yes, people are, I think you're right about people want to learn about it, but I don't think people understand truly when you really, I mean, first of all, It's barely interesting on the coasts, right? It's barely interesting in New York and in LA and SF. It's completely not interesting in Middle America.
Sure.
Okay? And I think that there are dramatically, I wish that there was 900 other businesses I was in, because I think the content would have drove even more engagement opportunities. I wish I was in food, news, sports, music, politics, weather. I mean, we could sit here the rest of the evening right now, and I'll give you a big list on this. I think it's super important to not get clouded by the wine factor being enough of an interesting thing to be a starting base. There was nobody who raised their hand right now.
Yeah, but if you talk in the book about, so Old Spice did this amazing marketing campaign and had very successful commercials, and it was a huge YouTube phenomenon. And then you talk about in the book that they kind of just stopped tweeting, and that kind of petered out. And so my question is, so you have, ignoring the fact that some people in this room are not passionate about wine, and the audience, I mean, people are here for the book as much as for you. But what I don't get is, what am I supposed to, if I'm the Old Spice product manager with the @Old Spice Twitter account, what am I supposed to be tweeting about?
The weather. And here's the point, right? I think the reason people are here is not because of the book or because of wine. The people that are here because of me are here because of me and what I've done for them, right? And what the engagement that I paid forward to make them feel like they want to come and support and hear what I have to say, and it's interesting. I think that Old Spice can talk about a quadrillion things. If you walked into Procter & Gamble right now and said, hey, Old Spice brand manager, what do you represent? Do you know they'd give you a whole thesis of how they're the 17-year-old dude that rock climbs on the weekends and drinks cappuccinos on Thursday? So be that dude, right? We have a brand, Brisk, at PepsiCo, that we're urban hip hop. That is the demo that we want to sell to. And you know what we talk about? We talk about Nicki Minaj.
Okay.
And so it's super simple for a brand.
So you talk about the things that are interesting to your audience, essentially, regardless of whether it's actually
Of course, we don't
product.
tweet, here's a coupon, or watch our new commercial, or do what every other brand does, which is, how many people here have liked a Facebook fan page? Raise your hand. You know, these people, including you didn't like those pages so that they can push more of the media that you can see on television or in print. They liked it because they liked it at first, they were testing it and what have you. The brands that know how to engage and talk about the things that matter to that community have a shot. The ones that continue to push things down their throat that don't matter, don't. I mean, Old Spice is deodorant, right? They could talk about if they wanted to talk about the NFL lockout right now, it would be very relevant and would work for them. Otherwise, if it wouldn't, why are they doing all the other things they've done in every other traditional platform? Because they pushed that message towards us, right?
Sure. But so, you also mentioned in the book how people.
And you said something very interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
You said.
I'd love it if you think I said something interesting.
You said they ran a very successful campaign. It is my belief that there is no such thing as a social media campaign. That this is based on relationship. And the reason I took a pot shot at them is because everybody's been bumbling over themselves to praise Old Spice. And Old Spice is a nice social media campaign, but it is not a nice execution of the thank you economy. This book is not about campaigns. This is about having a relationship forever. So what I think Old Spice is I think Old Spice is a 6'2" dude with light blue eyes and knows how to dress and can hook up with chicks every night of the week. But I feel like ends up being a 51-year-old bald dude with a big gut and has no family.
Is anybody here from Procter & Gamble?
That's what I believe. And listen, I'm super, Jim Kiltz, the former CEO of Gillette, who's, sold to Procter & Gamble, is a good friend of mine, went to the Super Bowl together. They know where I stand on this. And I, not the one that they care, back to the whole Maytag thing. Yeah. But two, I think they're gonna care. And it's not because I'm gonna get bigger. It's just that this is the beginning of where this is all going. You guys care more about your social relationships and the context of that data than anything else. For example, a really interesting story that ties this in well to me, of how I think people are gonna shop. I was in New York City going to a movie, and first of all, this may be my last public appearance because I'm going to get arrested for snooping. I mean, I live my life now trying to get into people's business, right? Because I love learning trends of what's going on in the trenches. I'm at the movies lined up in New York, and this guy, luckily, has an earpiece, right? So he's talking very loud, so I don't even have to do that much work. He's right in front of me. He's closer than we are, and he's talking to his wife like she's 17 miles away, right? Honey, what movie should we see? And that's what catches my attention. My poor wife, we're talking, and I hear that, I'm like, I have to, and I start listening, right? I'm like, why would he say that if we're in line? And this is how I process, this is how I live my life, right? I only care about the social human aspects. I'm like, why would this man who's not 15, because that would make sense to me, you know, who's 65 years old, if I'm pegging him right, what happens next is amazing. He goes, what should we see tonight? She's like, I don't know, how, whatever. He takes out his phone and he launches TweetDeck. So right away, I'm like, okay, good. I'm going to use this story because can we finally say that it's not just about 12-year-olds that use this stuff? This guy's 100, okay? So he takes TweetDeck and he does something. I don't know what he's doing. I can't see, but he waits a few minutes and then I get back to talking and then sure enough, he's like, all right, and this is pretty funny actually. I wish it was a different example. He goes, all right, let's go see the Social Network, right? He goes, everybody says it's awesome. I said to my wife, I'm like, see, that's what I'm talking about. This man made his point of purchase decision 1 second before he was buying because of how the world's changing. He has the data on him, right? And more importantly, he bought based on his social graph. 10 years ago, that guy would have sat up on Friday night and watched Siskel and Ebert, maybe 15 years ago, and that's how he would have decided. 5 years ago, he might have read it in the New York Times. 3 years ago, he would have went to Rotten Tomatoes and got his decision. Today, he's getting it from his social context because the people in his world are telling him this. I think this is a humongous dynamic. I think this is very much how people are going to continue to shop, and this will evolve as the phone evolves. As you start walking into Walmart and you get push notified your deals, you're not going to need to check in. You're definitely not going to listen to the radio on the way to the store and be impacted on what you're going to buy. And radio's selling billions of dollars in ads right now because mom's driving to the store at 3 o'clock, and if you run a Tide or a Dove commercial, she'll be more likely to buy. Mom's not listening to the radio. She's on the phone, and hopefully she's on the phone, not texting and not looking at the road, you know?
And has already made her decision about what she's going to buy 15 years ago.
Or she's going to make that decision when she walks in and she uses new technologies and getting push notified, or in 10 years using augmented reality because she's going to use her phone and she's going to see the way they treat their workers or their social status. I mean, there's so much coming. It's clearly disruptive. It's clearly obvious to everybody how much is going on. You see it in your kids. You see it in society, but we don't want to allow it to execute in the boardroom because we want to hold on as long as we can to the way it was. And I don't blame big brands. They play a different game than an entrepreneur does, right?
Sure.
They're reporting every 3 months to the street. Right. So they're playing a totally different game, which is why I hate when people in my space always say, they don't get it. They get it. They're playing a different game than you. You're playing basketball, they're playing hockey. The problem is they're gonna be affected by it, and I'm surprised that more companies are not starting to at least have little ninja units or starting to play a little. Mm-hmm. And then I'm shocked by the small entrepreneurs. And this is not about just big business. I don't think small businesses care about their customers as much as they like to say they do. I really don't. I'm so tired of small businesses telling me, you should shop local because we care about you. And then I go into a bookstore on my book tour and there's one kid behind the register listening to his iPod and there's nobody in the store helping anybody. And I get much more service at Barnes & Noble. So just because you're small doesn't mean you care. And I think it's massive lip service. I think 99% of businesses in America don't give a shit about their end user. And I think they're gonna pay for it.
I mean, take airlines, for example. It's sort of a little obsession of mine how when I read my Twitter feed, inevitably, there's a tweet from somebody saying like, weather delays at O'Hare, which is not actually information because that happens all the time. But essentially it becomes an opportunity. Somebody's sitting in the airport, they're bored, they have a smartphone, they have a Twitter client, and they're sort of posting about their experience. And then it amps up to, gee, American Airlines, thanks a lot for, 2 hours sitting on the tarmac with no explanation and no free peanuts. And then what that turns into is a sort of, potential opportunity for somebody at American Airlines to say, oh, we're really sorry, at 27 whatever, here's X. Here's a card for free Wi-Fi on your next flight. Here's a few thousand miles. There's a point at which you're kind of screwed if you're American Airlines in that environment.
Everything I write about in this book will be ruined in 5 years.
Ruined in what way? Because there'd be too many people taking advantage of it?
And too many people on the other end from businesses will be doing it as a tactic, not coming from the right place. So let me explain. Email. Think back to the day, this is fun because this isn't just an 18-year-old crowd. Think back to the day you guys got your first email. You've got mail. It was like Santa came over. You know why? You sat there and you're like, hold on. See, we forget. Let's all go back together real quick. Hold on. I'm not gonna pay a stamp fee to send this letter. I don't have to make phone calls long distance because I can write this. Wait a minute, they're definitely going to charge for this soon. I mean, we were blown away, and we got really excited, and email was the greatest. I mean, people made movies about it. It was the greatest thing that ever happened. How do you guys collectively feel about email now? You know, even the Groupon Guild Group phenomenon, it's only 2 years old. You couldn't wait to get $40 worth of sushi for 20 bucks. It's the greatest thing that ever happened. Now you've signed up for all of them, and you're deleting them. You don't even care if somebody's giving you $1 million home for $4. You're out, right? So we get very spoiled. Free shipping. 1998, Wine Library, $4 million company. Today, over 60. Still our biggest day, free shipping, 1998. People were buying wine that day like it had the cure inside. One guy bought 20 cases of wine that day, left a note and said, buying this for my daughter's wedding. Me living in the thank you economy back there but not realizing it, pick up the phone and call him and say, hey, thanks so much. You know, just wanted to call you to congratulate you about the wedding. When is it? He goes, oh, no, Gary, my daughter's 12. I go, what?
I hope you sold him wine that
will
age
what?
well.
He goes, she's 12 years old. He goes, but this is such a sick deal. I'm going to put this in the basement for the next 20 years. Now we've become so entitled with free shipping that we don't even buy anything unless free shipping comes.
Sure.
We are going to be treated in a way that you cannot imagine, not because companies care, but because it's cost efficient in a world where you're putting out more data than ever. We know more about you. Let me give you a story about the thank you economy. I created a thank you department in Wine Library. I figured I needed a case study since the book was out, right? So I called Kristen. I said, Kristen, let's find somebody online that's interesting, maybe unhappy, hasn't shopped with us in a long time, happy, big, find me something, give me an edge case. She goes, some guy just placed 2 orders for $25,000 worth of wine in the last 2 weeks, new customer in Chicago, all right? So, but FYI, Wine Library is a very big high-end wine shop, so that's not super unusual. It's just a good order. I mean, we have plenty of customers who spend 6 figures a year because we deal in the high-end collectible stuff and we're very price-driven, so we get a lot of business that way. I go, okay, let's find him on Facebook or Twitter. She finds him on Twitter, and then we start following what he's saying. We put it into our CRM, we attach his Twitter feed into our back end, and we follow what he's saying. Over the course of a couple weeks, we realized this guy is obsessed with Jay Cutler. You know, Jay Cutler, I love you. You know, Jay Cutler's the best quarterback. Don't be mad at Jay Cutler. We would have won that game against the Packers if he wasn't hurt. On and on and on, just obsessed. So finally I call Kristen, I say, Kristen, let's send this guy a Jay Cutler signed jersey from eBay with a note that says, thank you so much for your business. This guy will never shop with another wine shop because we touched his emotional center and we have the data to go there. If Dunkin' Donuts sent me a Jets jersey in the mail right now, I would never go to Starbucks again. I wouldn't, because they're, and listen, what happens when you tweet out you're stuck in traffic, dead traffic, and Hess gas station hits you up and says, all right, you need to make a right on Fullerton and a left on Demont, and you save yourself 45 minutes because they use some traffic software to tell you what happened. What happens when Dove helps you get your daughter into the private nursery school in Chicago that you couldn't get her into? Literally gets her in for you. I think we're living on the dawn of the humanization of business. I understand how it can act weird, but we humanized the pet dog. And in the 1950s, that product was outside. The dog was outside. We didn't care about Spot. We did, but we didn't. Today, Spot lives in our bed with clothes and gourmet food. We are human beings. We need to act human, and when we're done acting human amongst ourselves, we start humanizing other things. Because we handle some of these accounts and have been acting human, am seeing trends that show me that people are willing to act human with Nike and Starbucks and Nestle and Green Mountain Coffee, truly talk to them as if they were a person because they know there's a person behind it. I think that is a very important battleground going forward. And I think it's very fascinating to understand that it's something that's hard for your competition to spend money against. Once you have that emotional attachment, it costs a lot for you to change friends. I've asked a friend to write a book where he lives on tweeting and Facebooking about negative experiences about brands and lives his life for free based on social complaining.
Well, it used to be a phenomenon. I had a friend, 20 years ago who would spend time, writing to Frito-Lay and say, this bag of Fritos just didn't have that usual zing. And she would write it in the name of her cat and then get a package of Cheetos and Fritos and all that kind of jazz in the mail.
It's there.
Now, she was doing that to be funny, but today there's so many more opportunities to do that. So how do you, if you're a company trying to engage in this phenomenon, how do you do that without having your shirt taken away?
It's still early. I mean, I don't think people realize the fact that you're here and have any clue of what I am and are interested in this subject matter alone puts you so much further ahead of where people really don't know all these things, right? I mean, how many people here know what Yobongo is? That's a site that I think is going to be a big deal, right? How many people here have answered a question on Quora? Good work, right? So, there's always things that are coming. There's always trends that are coming, right? I think it's still very early. I think that companies don't have to necessarily give stuff away. I think that will go away pretty quickly. I think we'll have some of that, but I don't think it's just about that. And I don't think it's just, can we get off the whole handwritten note phenomenon? I'm so tired of people coming up to me, Gary, you know what I do? Let me guess. You send a handwritten note. How'd you know? Because that's what everybody's talking about right now, right? Like the handwritten note is so phenomenal. It's not about a tactic. It's about a thesis. It's about the handwritten note. It's about picking somebody up on the side of the road. It's about doing it for the right reason, for running the marathon with a customer. The reason I write my books and early and don't hold on to it and get more competitive. I've had some people come up to me and say, why do you come out so early? Why don't you do a little more land grabbing and then come out? Why didn't VaynerMedia become bigger before you started really giving away the VaynerMedia secret? There's a couple reasons. One, everything moves extremely quickly, and I think people are going to figure it out. But two, I think there's a very substantial value in paying forward. I know it's a very Zen thing, but in a world where social currency matters, and that's what I believe, that being the first or one of the first to talk about things that eventually happen matter. In Crush It, I wrote about Tumblr at nausea. Now Tumblr is exploding. It is clearly the number 3 player now in social media. It is the fastest growing site literally on the internet, and it's mattered for me, right? I think to answer your question, I think companies are going to have to find a lot of different ways to show that they care, and it can't be tactical. Every time I see a company donate money to the Japan relief, for some reason, and this is my belief, I believe consumers' radars, their BS radars, are much better than we give credit to them for. It's very obvious to me which companies are looking to do it as a tactic and which company's just doing it, right? Every time, can we once and for all start calling out people that say things, and I wrote about this in Thank You Economy. If I see one more person say, if I get 100 new followers on Twitter, I'll donate $100 to Japan. Hey, asshole, just donate the money. Jesus Christ. We know what you're doing. It doesn't feel good, and and by the way, that's my whole top line thesis. I actually think 90% of the businesses and people that are in social today and working it hard are doing more brand damage than good because they're exposing themselves to a lot of tactical, short sight kind of moves that are hurting them long term. I'm here to do business with every person in this crowd. That's why I write these books. That's what I do for a living. I want your money. I want your business. But I want it over the next 50 years, not tonight. And that's the difference.
So who's doing it wrong and who's doing it right?
This is interesting. This is something that I'm not as good at answering as I should be because, first of all, I'm obsessed with not paying attention to other things. It's
That's an interesting obsession. Slightly oxymoronic.
A little bit. I don't look at my competition. I'm not paying attention to, my people at Vayner pay attention to the client's competition because they want reporting. I don't. I'm not super worried about what Kraft is doing versus Campbell's. I'm not worried about what Coke is doing versus our Pepsi client. I'm really not. I'm worried about what we're doing. So I'm not sure. I can tell you that one of the things that really attracted me to PepsiCo, and I wanted that business, was they were a digital leader. They want to do stuff with Instagram and Quora and Yobongo, and those are the things I'm passionate about. I think emerging technology is important. I can tell you that I've been impressed at times with different things. I think Kleenex just did a very interesting campaign on Facebook where they leveraged, I think sampling needs to be disrupted. Consumer sampling is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Like, what are you getting out of going to like a football game and giving people the new pack of gum or a little sample of the new soda? There's no data collection. I'd much rather do that through Facebook, get the data. I'll pay for the shipping, but I'm getting something at the end of the day. Hiring a squad to go out there and sample, So I think Kleenex did an interesting sampling thing recently, but that could be a tactic. To me, the companies that are doing the best are the ones that if I went to their Facebook wall or their Twitter account, that 90% of the things that they pushed out were answering things and solving problems for their user. You go to Gary V's Twitter, if you go to twitter.com youtube.com/GaryV, GaryVee right now, I promise you, 90% of what you see are at replies. And the other 10% is buy my book and come and see me at this breakfast. I have no problem with selling. I have a problem when it's the only thing you do. I have a problem when I see brands retweeting nice things about themselves. That's called bragging. So I think there's just a disconnect of how to act social. I think you have a lot of PR companies handling the communities. PR is in B2B. They've never dealt with the consumer.
Right.
They're pitching you,
Yeah,
right? They're
sure.
pitching, this radio station. They're pitching. They're in the B2B business. They've really struggled. I think that's been a big mistake for a lot of companies. They've let their PR companies handle their social. I can recognize a PR company handling a social account from 84 miles away. It's a content calendar. It's all this stuff. And so, I think, I don't know specifically because it changes. I hate to give you an answer because they might have ruined it this week or they might have started doing it well this week. The answer is show me somebody who's giving and selling. Because I don't want to just be Mother Teresa, back to what I said. I like the idea of like a coupon and all those things are fine. I don't mind those tactics, but I need strategy and I need a whole lot of giving to create a true community that's convertible. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we'd like to extend it to questions. So who has a question?
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you today?
I'm well. What's your name?
My name is Robert.
Hey, Robert.
Hi, Gary. I'd like to thank you for coming today, but I want to know, how do you autograph my iPod edition of your book?
Pretty easily. I've signed
Sharpie?
23 Kindles on this book tour, probably about 4 iPads, which is a big leap because iPads are fancy schmancy, right? Is there a deeper question to that? Are you making a point of is the digital world changing the physical world, or are we just having fun and we're...
Is the digital world changing the physical world to the extent that books, which I'm accustomed to
Yeah.
buying at my age,
Yeah.
become something that's obsolete?
Here's my thing on that. I wrote a book, right? And I'm this big forward, right? I will continue to I am not interested in the platform. I think people are obsessed with platform. I don't give a rat's ass about platform. If people still went outside and looked in the air for their message, I'd be the first person on top of this building right now doing smoke signals, right? People were upset that the horses weren't moving us around anymore, right? Things change, right? There was people that debated, wow, the family is gonna die because now we're not gonna sit around a radio, we're gonna be a little more spread out in the house watching the television. And there's some degrees of that being true. The fact of the matter is that I don't care about the platform, I care about the message. People continue to read books, and a lot of people that I want to reach continue to read books, and that's why I continue to print and don't go direct to Kindle or direct to iPad. Will that day come? Very possibly. You may be emotional about the book because there's so much charm to it. You grew up with it. I get it. Do you know how many people would be just devastated if people decided to stop printing newspapers because the Sunday morning with a coffee? That's religion, right? To certain people. So I get the nobody loves nostalgia more than me. It's actually my entire marketing plan. Like the whole Betty White thing, makes sense to me. That's what I believe in. Bring things back that have emotion, right? Back to sending somebody a Bears jersey instead of giving them $1,000 worth of wine and knowing that brings me more ROI, right? Hit the emotional center. I can never sit here and get emotional about platform. I only care about message. I feel bad if somebody's sad that the book is gone. I understand. As not a big book reader, I won't lose anything. But for example, I'm freaking out that the NFL might go to 18 games instead of 16 games because that's my most passionate thing outside of my family. And what is that going to mean? Am I going to care as much? Is that too much? So I understand when things get disrupted, how they can matter. But I don't think it's evil. I think people get very caught up in thinking things are bad. It's just evolution. It's just the way it is. I think we're more human than ever. I have relationships with people in this room strictly because of these platforms, strictly. And they get to grow. That's a starting point. What Twitter engagement allows me to do is have a starting point with somebody in Des Moines, Iowa, and then we could take it to the next level. And I'm super touchy-feely. I like the hug. I'm a big, I like kissing dudes on the cheek. I'm really... girly, So, I like that stuff. I don't want that to go away. I view this as a gateway drug to more opportunities to engage. and people look at it as taking away from. So that's kind of how I view the same with the book, you know? It's the message.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So social media is 24/7.
Yes.
How do you do that and, have a job?
Yeah,
Run
that's
your
usually
businesses?
the
How do
biggest
you make
question I
time
get asked,
for
right?
it?
Like, Gary, you talk so much about engagement. When do I do my real job? There's a couple of answers to, you're asking a different question. Let me just answer that one because I think people think that. I've never understood when in our time did engaging with your end user and potential client and active client not become the real job, right? And so I will tell you that this is how I did it. I audited my career. I looked at what I did day to day and said, what's more important than creating a community in a world that's going to be completely based on how strong and real is your community, right? And so you look at things like Grateful Dead or Fish or some of these, right? These guys aren't as big fan bases as you see with like Gaga or Bieber, but they live forever, and that's why they're the most valuable properties in the game, right? That's why the Rolling Stones tomorrow can fill any stadium in this country, right? And so I think about those kind of dynamics, and I said there's value in real community. The only way you have a real community when you're not, some unbelievable form of content, just solid maybe, like me, is you care first. And so I just looked at what I did for a living and decided this was more important. I just decided that I didn't have to ring up everybody at the register. I didn't have to stock the shelves. I didn't have to order the wine. I didn't have to do the email service anymore, which was the lifeline of our store. I mean, I spent an hour a day writing the email because anytime somebody else did, we sold 50% less product. But I decided those things weren't as important. And I think that companies are going to start realizing that spending weeks on a $3 million television commercial during the Super Bowl is not going to have the same ROI as hiring $3 million worth of people to give a crap about their customer in the trenches. And so I think it's about auditing what you do and understanding how important this is. And really this comes down to push-ups. You can read about push-ups, but you're not going to get the results. And so you can talk about social, but if you put 45 minutes into social, you're going to get 45-minute results. And if you put in 14 hours, you're going to get 14-hour results. And obviously, there's people that understand, and then there's form, right? That's a whole other dynamic. Some people actually know how to do push-ups in the right way. Maybe I'm kind of cheating because I'm not that strong, right? And so, there's also form. And that's kind of what I talk about with the thank you economy. The ship has sailed that is this important. If you're in the crowd right now and you've been putting your head in the sand and decided for some unknown reason that this isn't relevant to you, that your customer is not on Facebook and Twitter, that this is a waste because the people you're trying to sell to are B2B, oh, by the way, humans make those decisions, or that my demo is older, oh, by the way, all your grandmas are on Twitter, and Facebook, or at least Facebook. And if you have the audacity to think that this is not affecting your business when this stuff is overthrowing governments and helping people in times of like tsunamis, you are just completely in denial because you don't want to do it. And I understand why you don't want to do it. You say things like, I didn't grow up with this. Well, guess what? You didn't grow up driving either, and you figured it out, right? You didn't grow up with a cell phone. You figured it out. There's a lot of reasons and excuses people come up for not doing this on a solopreneur or small business level. And honestly, it's going to, I'm sure you have acquaintances or friends or stories that you know of people that didn't go on .com in 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001 and got put out of business because of it. I believe the social movement is strong enough to do the same thing, and maybe even quicker and more deadly and more long-term because your community goes with you no matter where you go. This isn't about, well, what happens when Facebook's not a fad? Well, when you moved from Cincinnati to San Francisco, if you had a 20-year relationship in Cincinnati, you didn't just stop it. You still called, you still met. Relationships go wherever you go.
Hi, I'm a physician. The healthcare industry, kind of like you said, they're sort of afraid of this new media.
Sure.
So I just wanted to get your take on how it can be applied, whether it's a small solo practice or a big hospital.
It's tough, right? Because when you get into finance and healthcare and pharmaceutical and alcohol, there's legalities. So there's certain things I want to do in principle that maybe you flat out can't do. So I don't know all the dynamics of healthcare of what's legal for you to do. And obviously when you're a physician, and I've talked to a lot of them, and we've got a pharma company that we're under a strict NDA. I can't even mention the company. I mean, boy, oh boy, that was like 6 months of being in boot camp to figure out everything. One tweet from us, one Facebook status from one of my employees in the wrong direction, and FDA's coming down and ripping faces off, right? So we're scared. I will tell you this. the number one thing that I think people don't understand about social media is you're sitting in your room right now and you're saying, you know what, this kid's actually making a little bit of sense. This is the talk that's gonna I'm gonna do it, because I'm a little motivational and you're getting a little pumped, right? Even though it's early. And you're saying, okay, I'm gonna do it, fine. The problem is everybody wants to then think of, what am I gonna tweet about? What am I gonna say? The biggest disconnect, in my opinion, is that everybody wants to talk when the whole game's about listening. So the number one thing I would tell you as a physician is I would go to search.twitter.com, which I think is easily one of the 2 or 3 most important websites on the internet. I would type in words that that are relevant to your world. I don't know what you practice, but whether it's flu or back pain or whatever you know. And the fact that this whole universe is now a cocktail party, it is very much acceptable for you to read something on Twitter, see somebody saying something, for you to @reply them and give them the answer. You know the rules of what you can and can't say, claims you can and can't make. Not worry about them, becoming your client, right? But worry about giving that service, back to something you brought up that I wrote about in the book, and see what that leads to. Because I think when you're actually helping people, a lot of stuff happens. And if you're local, this is something a lot of people don't know, you could search back pain space. So you put a space, and then you put near, NEAR, colon, and your zip code, all in one line, no spaces there. So you say a word, space, near, colon, zip code, and you can search conversations within a 10-mile radius. So if you feel like you're local and you don't want to weed through all the noise, well, then you could talk about people that have auto body shop problems in a 5-mile radius, 10-mile radius, or people that are more likely to use you. So I would say at the top line, I think number one, creating content is very valuable. So I think whether it's video, audio, or print, whatever works best for you, I would consider creating a blog and creating content, because it's nice to have a home. It's nice to have a link when you're on a Twitter account to where it goes. That was my whole blueprint, right? I came in and answered every wine question on Twitter in 2007, literally every one. And they would then see, who is this guy? Because I wasn't saying, buy this Chardonnay, or here's free shipping to Wine Library, or so weird, I just did an episode on Syrah. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just answered questions. Then they'd be like, who is this guy? They'd click at me, they'd see my profile, Wine Library TV, they'd click it, they'd go into my world, and then they would consume my content. And by the way, you can be unbelievable at social, you can be the best marketing guy. If your content's not good enough, if you're not a good enough physician, you're not gonna win. If I'm not a good enough wine guy, or if I'm wrong, by the way, if everything I wrote in this book is wrong, in 4 years, I'm not gonna be relevant. And so, there's ways to do this, and it's about listening and about delivering quality products, solving people's problems. Because I think in a world, we all heard, and I don't know if you heard this, Eric Schmidt, the former CEO, now chairman of Google, said the other day, there's as much content being produced in every 48-hour window as was created from the beginning of mankind until 2003. Yeah, damn. Let's wrap our head around that. Everything we did, every article, that's just incredible, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure I believe it, but sure.
Yeah, listen.
I like Eric Schmidt.
It would really hurt Google to be wrong on that one, but maybe you're right.
Well,
maybe you're right.
I would like to see some data, but that's just me.
But it makes sense, because if you think about how limited the platforms were, there was only so many newspapers, there was only so many record labels, there was only so many TV stations, and now everybody's producing on there's a billion tweets going on right now, right? So I can wrap my head around it being possible. Well, so then what happens in a world with so much noise? What's gonna break through? Quality content? Yes, but boy, there's a lot of quality content. And more importantly, isn't it really just social commentating around the news, right? We all know that Elizabeth Taylor passed away this morning. It's the people, or maybe we didn't, sorry. But who social commentates on top of it best is usually who captures our attention. I believe that not only being a great DJ is what I'm talking about, or social commentator, I think about actually caring about that end user and creating that community is gonna be the differentiator.
Just knowing that you work in the NHL, with the NHL, and
Yep.
your passion for the Jets.
Yeah.
I think that we have an interesting case in the sense that we obviously use Facebook, Twitter, everything to engage our fans and kind of keep them with us in our family.
Yeah.
But now we're running into what I deal with every day is sponsors
Yeah.
saying, yes, we want the signs and the TV and the radio, but throw some social
Social,
media in
yeah.
there. Can you just touch on that balance?
Sure.
Of
So the
everything
Jets
going
are
on
a
that
client
way?
and the Nets are a client. So I have 2 sports teams as clients, so we're dealing with this as well, right? And the Jets and Nets are being proactive to us, saying, hey, you guys aren't that inexpensive, VaynerMedia. We'd like to monetize some of this stuff to really offset so we can sign you forever, right? I think it's about being authentic, right? Fans don't want you to tweet out to do a commercial status update on Facebook is insane. To do hey, go check out Gladstone tires, they're the best. I mean, like, that's not going to make anybody who's following the Kings happy. I think there's subtle ways to do it. I think when you look back at television and you see how it's evolved, I thought TV kind of, not necessarily had it right, but for a certain time, when they used to do like live commercials during the Today Show, like they bring out the dog and the Alpo would be there and like it was integrated into the content, I think is an interesting way to look at it. So, one of the things that we've been talking about is, when a status update is brought to you by right? And fans don't love it, but you might have saw the NHL did it during the draft, right? They were able to monetize it. We looked at that data hardcore, and it's, it's quite surprising. I think people at some level, human beings, understand that it's also business. And I think the more you can do in creating as little amount of friction to what they actually want, that's when you start getting into interesting things. So, whether it's traditional stuff like pre-rolls and post-rolls to the stuff you're doing, I think that's interesting. Or, in my opinion, here's what you do. I think you start building platforms. So, what do your fans really want? You know what they want? They want access to the players. They want access to the players. So if all of a sudden you guys made a commitment, you had 4 or 5 players that were, and I know the dynamics, and the NHL is a whole different animal, right? And the average NHL player looks very different than the average football wide receiver, right? They're very humble. They're not as interested. It's all team. It's just a very different DNA of NHL players. But there's inevitably 3 or 4 guys that want to eventually be on TV or marry Hillary Duff or something like that. So, so you always have that stuff. So some of them are going to put themselves out there. I'd rather see you create something like 15 minutes create a platform, right? Where people can go on Ustream for 15 minutes and talk to one of your players, right? And then that is sponsored by X, Y, and Z. And so I think that creating platforms that bring value to the user while still can, be sponsored by or brought to you by or, integrated interestingly is a fascinating way to look at it instead of like just pushing it out a commercial that has no value to the user. The second you start selling that is the second you're diluting your community. And you have to think about that.
I was glad to hear that you spent some time thinking about how small businesses scale and grow into $1 million and $1 billion companies. And so I've been thinking about that concept myself. And so in days past when big companies could scale by doing the push marketing, and that was effective, do you think that social media can have the same power to help scale smaller companies into $1 million companies?
I do, but I also think that what people have to understand about what social's bringing to the table is we're running marathons, right? So, it's going to take longer. I mean, I think one of the biggest things, I grew a small business and substantially, and it didn't happen in 5 minutes. It happened 20 hours a day, every day. I mean, I didn't take a day off for 7 years except for Christmas and New Year's. 7 years. Including Sundays, except the Jet games, right? So like 16, I mean, you're talking about an obnoxious amount of hard work, right? So I think one of the things that I think is super fascinating is that social levels the playing field at some level, right? Money still matters, and big companies still will have advantages, but it's not the same competitive advantage it had before. Wine Spectator that didn't have an advantage over me. I used the free platforms. I used YouTube and I used WordPress and I used Twitter and Facebook, and I've now built a brand that rivals a company that's been the dominant player and had much, much more money than me. And we see that every day, right? I mean, Netflix wasn't as big as Blockbuster. Amazon wasn't as big as Barnes & Nobles. Innovation does matter. And this one is the most practical and, at the same token, difficult innovation we've ever seen. Like, you can win in this platform. You can. You've got it doesn't cost you anything. You're not paying for bandwidth, and that's why net neutrality was so important. It kept the ability for somebody like yourself, somebody like myself, to go as far as we want to go, right? And so that's pretty neat, but it's very difficult because when you're a solo or a small, you've got all these other dynamics, and it takes business sense to be able to really get there. It takes the ability to audit your business and say, you know what, I need to take $10,000 less this year in salary and hire somebody for $12 an hour to do X because it's going to give me 3 hours a day. And I think most small business owners either can't afford or can't see how often they need to take 1 step backwards for 2 steps forward, right? Because they want a boat, and they want Nintendo Wii, and they want bullshit. Sorry.
And with that brings us to the end of our Drucker
I'm excited that
Business
bullshit was the last word I got in.